Today's guest is Kristin Affatato, a product development expert who's worked with founders at every stage of the journey. With experience working with product management of Pyrex, PopSocket, Instapot, Contigo, and much, much more, in this episode, we're focusing on something that doesn't show up on most spreadsheets: consumer insights. Kristen shares why understanding your customer, not just their demographics, but their desires and decision making, is the true foundation of a product that lasts. If you're building in the dark, this episode will help you turn on the lights. Welcome, Kristen. How are
Thank
you
you.
doing?
Good. Thanks for having me.
You're welcome. You're welcome. It's actually it's a pleasure. It's like honestly, we've just kind of started the podcast, and it's one of those things to get someone that has worked on such great products like you that
Mhm.
most people have in their house. It's a pleasure to have you.
Thank you.
So I know that you've carved out such a really unique niche in the world of product and operations. Like, how did you first get into what you're doing now?
Yeah, I would say I kind of fell into it a little bit and had met some really great people along the way. I think my background is in design and visual communications, and started my career actually in store design. Working for what was a small retailer or a big retailer, Sears. Was my first job out of school, working on the in-store team. And I had a manager who saw me and said, You're in the wrong field. You need to be in product." And within a couple of months, I was moved to the product team and really found my passion and fell in love, starting my career designing products. And so through that, then I kind of worked my way into other positions where my interest landed, whether it be more product management rather than design or product marketing, and really saw different facets of the journey, and kind of developed to where I am today.
Yeah. Do you just on a side note, you talked about that one manager that saw your talents and skills. Where do you think you would be without that one person who gave you a chance to put you in a different department?
Oh, that's a good question, honestly. I'm hoping I would always find my way this way. But it is a really good question. I mean, in your career you meet so many good people, and it's such a wonderful experience when you get to work with someone who literally can understand other people and pull out the best in them. And
Yeah.
really I got very fortunate in that sense very early on in my career.
Yeah, it's one of those things to find people like that, especially early on in your career, can really define where
Mhm.
you go and
Mhm.
really define the experience. Like you've worked on at least two of the three, no, I think three of the four products I mentioned I've got in my house.
Mhm.
And I think about what those products would have happened had that person not put you in the product development track. Like,
Yep.
would I even have those products? Like,
Ye
that's stuff that's like, I'm not sure. And so I love the idea that nobody, and he may not be a nobody to you, but
yeah.
to me, he's someone who I don't know the name of, is
Mhm.
really had such an impact on us by their impact on you. I just
Yep.
love it.
Yep, absolutely.
So, when you started in art school, it was this is which feels like a long way from product design.
Mhm.
Can you walk us through that journey of why you didn't stop being the creative in the business world?
Yeah, I was actually a drawing and painting major for the first 2 years of my college career and had no idea what I was gonna do, honestly. I knew I loved art, I knew I was talented in art. I had parents who came not from a creative background at all, and family members that didn't. So, I was really kind of the black sheep of the family in that sense, and I think it wasn't until, late on in my sophomore year of college, I was like, "Ooh, how am I going to actually support myself? I don't want to teach art, but I love the process of creating." And so kind of switched more into kind of graphic and product design. And after my undergrad career, decided I really wanted to focus more heavily on a kind of very strategic design thinking. And so I went and did get my master's in design, which kind of landed me there. So I'm a very creative individual, even though I don't hands-on design every day. I feel like I'm constantly creating, whether it be still cooking a lot, doing crafts, doing projects around the house. I feel like I'm always constantly creating in some sense.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
I'm really curious. I'm gonna kind of switch the topics up a little bit, but how involved were you, or well, I'm curious about your involvement in the pop socket specifically. Can you talk a little bit more about that? Like, how did you get brought into that, or was that something that you brought up? Like, how did that interaction happen?
With the company Pop Sockets,
Hmm.
I only worked for Pop Sockets for a couple of years. And it was actually just I was in housewares most of my career in product design and development, and I was at the point where I was really looking to make a change, both for personal reasons as well as professionally, to expand my categories and my expertise. And just ended up talking to them at a time that they were looking to make some changes to their team, and got brought in to help lead that product team for a little while.
That's awesome. And what kind of like I've always kind of been interested. Like normally when I get into a product, it's at the very early stages, so we're design. There's like everything has to be kind. But when you come into a more mature product, what does that look like? How does that? What's your day to day roles?
Yeah, I think, every brand can have a long life cycle, right? And to me it's about keeping the brand relevant, number 1. Number 2, focusing on consumer needs to build that roadmap for the brand and really continuing to provide innovation and product solutions to the consumer. Coming into kind of a mature brand, even Pop Sockets, I wouldn't say was mature, but a brand like Pyrex, for instance, you've got
Right.
100 and something year old brand. And how do you innovate on a brand and a product that basically lasts forever, right? It's passed down through generations. We've made it so good. And it is going back to listening to the consumer. I spent a lot of time when I first started in leading Pyrex product development. I spent time in people's homes and watching them use the product. What were they making on a day?
Mm.
I looked at macro and micro trends that were going on within culinary worlds and lifestyles, and really then set forth on a map of, okay, here are consumer pain points with our existing products. Here are expansion areas for the brand that we've never been before. And really start to lay out, a multi-year roadmap that then you start to execute against. So to me, it's about going back to that voice of the consumer and making sure that you're constantly not only improving on existing product that's in the market, but creating some innovation and giving them something new to come back for.
That's awesome. That's really cool.
So at what point did it really click that that customer insights was the key? Like,
Um,
when did that happen?
yeah, I would say early in my career, I went to work for, at the time it was a startup called, the brand was Contigo. The parent company was Ignite USA when I worked there. Contigo's now owned by Newell Brands. We were as small as 8 people at one point when I was there, really a startup. And what I think back to during that time in my career, this is, 20 years ago, was that we really did care about what the consumer thought. And we were a small, scrappy startup. We were intercepting people in the lobby of our building. We were going to Target and Walmart and Starbucks and watching people interact with product, whether it was our own or someone else's, to really start to understand what made those consumers tick, how they interacted with our product, what were those pain points they were having. And that was really where I started to go, oh, this really matters. It's not just creating a beautiful product. It's not, just using my gut on what I think is going to be cool. Like, there were a lot of surprises within there, within my first years of my career. One of them being Contito's best-selling travel mug we launched while I was there, and we launched it in Target. It actually bombed. It bombed in Target and got kicked out, I think, within the first 6 months of the planogram. It bombed so bad, and all of us were, eyes wide, "What happened here?" We all knew once consumers, like, people tried it, they loved it, but something wasn't resonating in store, and so we went in store and watched them, and we pulled people aside in lobbies of office buildings and just watch them pick up the product and interact with it. And what we found was, first, the packaging was terrible. Consumers didn't know how to use the product. And second, that the color material finish that we did on the product just wasn't right. It wasn't resonating with consumers. And we went back and revamped everything. And thankfully, the target buyer took a chance on us again, put us back in the planogram, and it was the number one selling travel mug then. And I think
Well,
that was an experience, and seeing that happen um, was really telling to me that, okay, you really do, this matters. This really matters.
can you go a little bit more into detail to what you changed? Like you said, it wasn't resonating, but
Yeah, yeah.
what were
So
those changes that really moved the needle?
sure. So we changed the actual travel mug was one of their first, the push button to open, release to seal, right? The automatically sealing mug, so you can't spill
Mhm.
your coffee.
Mm.
And what we found was, number one, consumers picked it up. The button was kind of hidden. We made it look all beautiful and stuff, but
Yeah,
it
yeah,
was
yeah.
kind of hidden. They didn't know what they were supposed to do with it. Number one. Number two, the packaging didn't explain it well either. So what we did was revamp. We changed the button color, made it stand out. We added a sticker that talked about it. It was very simple: press to sip, release to seal. And really, it was these simple changes that once consumers understood, all of a sudden they were like, "Oh, this is really cool. This is a game changer for me."
Yeah, that's awesome. It's almost like there's between making a Ferrari and an everyday sedan, and you kind of, where like only in a very specific niche actually wants a Ferrari as a daily driver.
Yeah,
Most people want that. It's
for sure.
usable, functionable, comfortable, but you know, yeah.
Yes.
No, that's cool. I think that's awesome.
Mhm.
When we were talking earlier, you had mentioned that people confuse consumer insights with just having data or making assumptions.
Uh-huh.
Can you just break that down to us and really, like, what's the actual difference between consumer insights and the data that comes from it?
To me, it's really have intentful responses from actual consumers to specific questions, and then using that to direct decisions. I think you don't want, I think a lot of people, like for instance at Contigo, when we first launched that product, we were so close to it. We're like, oh, everybody's going to get this. We knew how to use it, right? So we just assumed that the natural consumer would too. And I think you need to go back and really take a large group of consumers, or not even that large, honestly, but take yourself out of it, stop assuming, and get really intentful, thoughtful responses from actual consumers to help drive some of those directions and decisions.
So
How how big of a target group do you think is reasonable, or yeah, good
It
customers?
really doesn't need to be that big. I will tell you, I have done, especially if you get a random sample, as small as 14, is large, but large as, 2000. I think for me, it's more about the application and the questions. I will tell you, I have certain methodologies that I like better than others. Like, I'm not a big proponent of focus groups.
Ooh.
Mainly because I think people in focus groups a lot of times are more aware of the people around them, whether they know them or not, rather than actually sharing their actual insights. So I really prefer, in-depth one-on-one interviews or in-depth intercepts in a lobby or in a retail store. Rather than large groups, but you really don't need. I think a lot of people think you need these big budgets and these big studies, and you actually really don't. You get a random sample of 14 even and do really good in-depth one-on-one interviews, and you can get some really valuable insights out of that.
so
Yeah,
at
I
what
find.
point sorry, Brandon, I'll let you. I just want to add pin
Go
on top
ahead.
of this.
Go ahead.
At what point during a product development do you do that? Do you create the product first and then do it? Do
I
you
think
do
it's
the instant?
multiple stages. I will tell you, I've used insights, and what best practice that I love to do is, once you have a product road, create a research roadmap that goes along with it. And it's really because honestly, insights need to be injected in different stages of that product development process. Number one, before you even put a product on the roadmap, you need insights in terms of really exploratory, qualitative insights on what are these pain points that we're trying to solve for consumers before you even have a product idea. What is the problem we're trying to solve for? And I think that's something that a lot of people sometimes miss is having a specific problem they are trying to solve for. Number two, so you can do it qualitatively. I like for the most part, you can do it through, having them look at existing products. I've done that before where you've actually had them touch and feel existing products in the market, get the reaction to it, and pull insights from that. I've had it where I've spent time in people's homes and just watching them on their day to day, the products that they're using, how they're interacting within their lives, and get insights that way. Number two, then I think once you've kind of got a product concept, I think it's really important to test that concept with consumers. And that's something that's really valuable in getting their initial feedback without prompting. Have them take a look. What do you think of this? What's your initial reaction? I think is really important as well, because then you can refine your design to some of that insight and that feedback that you get and make changes early on in the process. I will say I've done 2 rounds of that sometimes. You sometimes could do it fine at a more final design stage. And then I also think testing packaging and USPs is really, really important. As I said earlier, like packaging makes a difference. You walk into those retail stores and in person and even online, we're constantly bombarded with content and products and you know uh, call outs from brands, and it's overwhelming as a consumer. And so making sure that your packaging is actually really helping. What's the say they say you have like 3 to 5 seconds to grab a consumer, right, and get them to understand your product, and making sure they have those key USPs on what's different about your product, what's unique about it, and why do they need it. So I think also testing packaging is really important. Now, that said, I've also tested products that have failed, which, it gives really great insight into future product development. So, kind of a postmortem. If something doesn't work, I think it's really important to go back and look at why. You can always do something as a postmortem if it doesn't work, as well as I love to say, I love to launch and love rather than launch and leave. So after a product has launched, making sure you're going back and what are consumers saying about your product, because you can always improve on something, always. And so going back, whether it be reading consumer reviews, looking at return rates, and that sort of thing, I think is also really helpful.
Where are you finding the majority of your people that you're using to sample to get feedback on? Like, where you find these sample sizes?
When we were when I've done it scrappily, where if you don't have a certain demographic you're looking for, you just want if you've got a pretty large target market, I've intercepted people in lobbies into office buildings and enticed them with a $10 Starbucks gift card. Right? Give me 20 minutes of your time. You can definitely do that. I have also used agencies where we had a very specific target demographic and they will recruit for that. You can I've done online surveys too. I don't always love online surveys, but you can. I mean, Survey Monkey for sure. You can set demographics for target markets there as well. And then I've also just gone into retailers really and intercepted people and observed if it's a specific category that we're looking at and wanting to see.
Do you ever use friends or family or people in your social circles?
Never.
Why is
I
that?
really don't. I don't like to do that, and I've worked at companies where they love to do that,
Hmm.
and I don't, because my family members all know the products that I work on, and yeah, I'll ask their feedback and stuff, but I would never use it to drive product decisions, mainly because we're too close. We are too
Right.
close to it. I am not. You think about the target market, and especially let's take United States. I am not the majority of the market within the United States. And looking at, I think number one, you've got to take personal bias out of it. And stepping out of your existing circle is what does that. So for me, I'm not a big fan of using friends and family.
Yeah, I think those are really good points. I think if you're yeah, for the reasons you said, I think it's important to realize that if there's a strong bias, but if for me, if I'm gonna present something to my family, I don't let them know the interaction of which it is, like whether it's my product or a client's product or um, I try to distance myself and say, hey, what is, and I don't even tell them what it is. I just put it in their hands, like, hey, what do you think of this?
Uh-huh.
And it like you said, take it with a grain of salt because it's a different type of interaction. But it's a for I like it because it's fast and accessible. I don't have to go put a big campaign together. If
Sure.
I add a feature and I want to see if they can figure it out, I can just give them that one piece with that feature on there, and they're gonna be like, "What the heck is this?" Or, "Oh, that's cool." Just that initial what is it? The subconscious response almost is what I'm looking for, and not you have to learn to read between the lines in that scenario, I
Yeah,
think.
I think you've
People
got to
are
make
gonna
sure you
take it.
also have friends and family that's also going to be brutally honest, right? Because they
Yeah.
know you, right? And they know, you don't want feelings hurt and stuff. Where I have found that strangers are more open about giving their opinions.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think when you yeah, absolutely. And what I used to do, now I'm a little bit more distanced from the product launch than I used to be, but what I used to do is actually I used to live in Denver. I'd go out into the downtown area, stand on the sidewalk and talk to people. There's,
100%.
hundreds of thousands of people walking past there. It was actually very easy.
Yep.
I mean, I really wanted to interact and that's fine, but a lot of people are curious. So you're looking for those curious people and just talk to them. And I never spent any money on it. But I
100%.
think
And that
yeah,
is exactly a lot of what we did early stages at Contigo was go down into lobbies, go on the corner. We were in downtown Chicago and you
awesome.
could easily get feedback for sure. People love to give feedback. And I think that's one thing too that not everybody thinks about is like people love to give their opinion. And so it's not hard to find people at all.
Yeah, absolutely, completely agree with that.
You had mentioned something, and I'm just kind of curious about this. I don't want to go too far into it, but you had mentioned how you would sit in someone's home and watch them use your product. What does that look like? Do you just walk up to people, be like, "Hey, can I just watch you use?" Or like, how do you do
Yeah,
that?
no, a lot of times, that is actually done through like a research agency partner. Again, not huge budgets like you would think. But no, they recruit a specific demographic that you're looking for, and they get the approvals beforehand. And yeah, you are invited into their home. We usually spent probably an hour or two with them and I've watched people make dinner, and, I've watched people bake bread, bake cookies, all sorts of things, and yeah, it's funny, the first one is probably a little uncomfortable if you've never done it before, but you're standing there, you're taking notes. A lot of times you video, which they're okay with, and you just observe them in their natural environment doing their everyday things. And it's really amazing when you break it down and start to see where their pain points are. And you can ask probing questions when you see something, right? But I will tell you, it's some of the most valuable insight you will ever get.
That's really interesting. I'm sorry, I just find that fascinating because that's something that I would be like, I'm not sure I would want someone in my house watching me cook.
Yeah, well, they're getting paid for
Mostly
it.
because I'm a bad cook, but
It's not. It's funny. They typically don't know what company or brand you work for, so they don't know why you're coming in or what product you're looking at either. Which I always think is really interesting because, of course, they're very curious. Like, well, who do you work for? I always tell them I work for a research agency. I don't even tell them what brand or product. I typically also had a
Great.
facilitator there because I'm biased myself, right? Working
Okay.
on product, and I don't want to lead those consumers in a direction or with a response, whether it be through a facial expression, tone of voice. So typically, I also brought a moderator that would facilitate any questions or anything to keep it very neutral and unbiased.
That's awesome. I love that. Yeah, I've heard all of these, a lot of people doing research, but I've not heard of people doing it in that capacity, being in the home with them. That's a really
Yeah.
cool approach.
Yeah, it's called in-home ethnography, and it's incredibly, incredibly valuable. I will
Yeah.
tell you, we used it in Pyrex, and got some of the best insights we've ever had for that brand out of it.
What insights did you actually like? Can you share like what you've actually changed based on that
Yeah.
insight?
So, Pyrex, 100-year-old brand, right? Everybody has a 9 by 13, and, everybody's had grandmas that had the mixing bowls, and some of them still have them. That brand is super, super interesting. Probably one of my most loved brands I've ever worked on. And that is also a really challenging brand, right? It's a very old brand, very mature category. And when I took over the brand, I was looking at a category that had been basically flat to down, no innovation. And you look at the planogram hadn't really changed much. The most product innovation they saw were, different colored lids. And how do you innovate on a product that basically lasts forever? And so we went into the home to really understand what consumers were making with our product, how were they using it, and so through observing these individuals in their home, what we saw was, number one, our existing shapes that have been in the line forever that are great sellers, they're only using for a handful of things, brownies, right? A cake. And what we found was they weren't really great for lasagna or, mom's casserole because it wasn't deep enough. It would spill over the edges, or we saw people baking cakes now in toaster ovens versus their whole oven because it used less energy and was faster to heat up. And well, we don't have any shapes that fit in those toaster ovens. And so we really came out of there with some really valuable insights in, okay, consumers are baking differently. How can we be there and show up? And we launched the Pyrex. We came back with, actually, we redesigned a whole wear line around Pyrex, actually based on some of the feedback with, they wanted bigger handles. A lot of times they had a hard time grabbing it out of the oven. They wanted deeper dishes. They wanted smaller dishes. So if they were cooking for one in a toaster oven, and we came back with a whole roadmap. And what we found was, we did develop a whole new wear line, but what we decided was glass development is very different than a lot of other products because of the nature of the material. We said, well, there's a new wear will take us 2 to 3 years to hit market. How do we hit market faster on some of these key insights that we know could have immediate response to the consumer? And so what we did was take our existing shapes and we made them an inch and a half deeper, and hit the market 6 months later, and had close to 10 million in incremental sales that first year.
Wow. Um, so I would love to just kind of shift just slightly, and talk about one of the bigger traps that we've seen founders make where they sit there and go, I know what the customer wants. I mean, I've seen this video of I can't remember who it was talking about Steve Jobs, and Steve Jobs is like, I know what they want more than they know what they want. And I mean, Steve Jobs was Steve Jobs. Not everyone is Steve Jobs,
Mhm.
but I would love to know what, like, how does this, how, like, have you seen that in any of the companies you worked for, and what does that, how does that actually play out?
Yeah, I have for sure. And I think some of it stems was, if you're talking, a founder versus a bigger company and brand, I think founders are uniquely different, right? If they have created a product and founded a brand, they basically struck gold, right? It's a very, very difficult thing to do, is launch a product on your own and be successful at it. And I think going back to that, though, before they were a brand, and had a product in market, they were a consumer at home who found a pain point they wanted to solve for. And I think it goes back to them going, I have this problem in my everyday life. What can I do about it? And then they came up with a solution. They said, I know others have this problem. And so they launched a product and they were successful at it. And like I joke with it, but it is striking gold having a really successful product, especially a new one that's not already tied to a brand that consumers know. And so I think there's a natural inclination then to go, I can do this again. I know exactly what they want, rather than going, oh, I might be a little too close to this. And B, it's very hard to strike gold twice. And so for me, it's yes, I've encountered it before. I think there's a sense of, well, I did it once, so I can do it again. When it's extremely difficult. It's like over 80% of new products fail. That the percentages are extremely, extremely high. And I think there are a lot of people that just assume, well, I did it once, I can do it again.
And that percentage is for established businesses, is that correct? Like,
Yes.
that's yeah.
Yes. It's
People that are
extremely
experts in
difficult.
the industry.
Yes.
So I'm looking at my questions, and I'm just like, you hit that one, you've hit that one, you hit that one. So but you've helped founders, like you've helped people build better businesses by spotting patterns in their day-to-day operations.
Uh-huh.
How do you teach people to extract those insights from the mess running around the business? Like, how do you teach them to be like that laser focus? This is what matters and this doesn't.
Yeah, I think it goes back to discipline, right? And having discipline and process, and trying to teach that discipline and process. And I always also say, you really want to make sure you're evaluating a product within the process amongst key things. So, a common term, or they call it DVF, desirability, uh, viability, and feasibility. And I think those are three really key things that you really need to evaluate a product concept on and make sure that you have a product that's desirable to the consumer. So those, through insights, right? Viable, through business case. I can't tell you how many products I've seen people want to launch that they have not done a business case on to make sure it's a viable product, whether it be cost and retail and gross margin, or whether it be over time paying for the investment up front, that it makes it worthwhile. So it's really important to make sure you have a viable product, and run business case scenarios even with payback of investment money. It is also money that it's going to take to market it, which a lot of people don't really look at. Like, it's great to launch a product, but you can't sell secrets. So, you've got to make sure that you're investing to tell the consumer about the product. And then feasibility, is this something you can actually create and bring to market, and do it successfully? And I think those are key metrics, that you need to be evaluating throughout the process, as well as then having the discipline of following a product development process. I'm a big proponent of the stage gate, because it really helps you look at those key things: desirability, viability, feasibility, throughout the process. And it has gates in place to make sure if you've got some issues in some of those, it stops you, right? And it allows you to evaluate, it allows you to tweak, it allows you to change direction if you need to.
Yeah.
So I have a question. These larger companies, do you see them? What level of use of like NDAs and non competes are they using versus are they even concerned about it, or are they just trying to push ideas? Like, how does that work?
Um, I mean, in terms of getting product, like using inventors to help fuel the roadmap, is that what you're speaking to?
Yeah, like if you're like let's say you're working with a consumer or like a even in like a case study or
Yeah.
just anywhere in their business, are they doing things to like are they are they doing so much in house they're not worried about it? Are they worried about
Yeah,
like
I think they're
ideas? How long are they protecting the us for
yeah,
versus just
it
pushing it as hard as they
it
can?
depends on the company, right? It really depends on the company. I mean, for sure they have NDAs in place, right? And non-competes. Now, everybody knows non-competes are basically unenforceable these days. Um, what I will say is industries is small, but they will have NDAs in place, especially when also talking to consumer data. I think there's also, I've run a group for a company that actually worked with outside inventors to help fuel the roadmap and fill gaps. And that we held that group at really top secret. Like, we had code names for projects. When I ran, the area, a lot of times people didn't even know what projects I was working on because it was trying to keep the integrity of ideas to the rightful owners. I've also worked in companies where product development was in a different part of the building and you had to have a scan card to get in because it was so
Hmm.
top secret. So I think it really depends on the company and how open they are with ideas. Especially depending on what the IP, if there is IP involved and what that IP is going to be, how big of an innovation it is it game changing to the category? I've had some projects on where we made team members sign NDAs before they could work on them. So it just depends, I think, on the company and the type of project that you're working on.
Hmm. And how do you think that affects the product launch versus have you worked on any that are on the opposite side of that, or are they all pretty much on lockdown?
No, I've definitely worked on some that are. Again, it goes back to, I think, ones that we know are really game changing versus, okay, this is an adaptation of something that's in the market already, right? Or
Mhm.
this is an improvement of a product that's currently in the market. You're not going to have that on lockdown, right? It's still great to continue to grow sales and provide the right solution to the consumer, but it's not game changing innovation that you wouldn't want your competitors to get a hold of. So I think it just depends.
So what I'm hearing is the difference is how impactful you think that product is going to be in the market.
Okay.
So if it's like a marginal improvement, who cares who gets a hold of it? But if it's like Contigo, it's going to be like, no, let's just be a little bit more careful and not showing everybody.
Yeah, I mean, you definitely didn't want your competitors getting a hold of any of the things you were working on, right? Um, but I would say, like in terms of internal discussions, in product improvements, a lot of people within the company were aware versus ones that were game-changing innovation that we saw making big advances within a category. Those were probably more on lockdown.
How do you think that affected the speed to market? Having everything completely locked down versus being able to just share between
Yeah, I
the
wouldn't say, you know, of course, product adaptations are always going to be quicker to market than game changing innovation a lot of times. I wouldn't say that I saw it. They're to me, they're two different things because some of it, a lot of times, involve more research and development upfront. So, let's say you're working on a new heating technology in a product, right? That's game changing innovation that was probably on lockdown, but it would take longer naturally to get that product to market because you're going to have more testing, because you're going to have more rigor around product design versus maybe a change in a feature on an existing product. So, I mean, it definitely probably, I don't think it just because it was more game changing it means it's so much longer or it automatically added 2 years to your product development. I think it just, a lot of times those projects just because of the nature of them were longer term development projects anyways.
gotcha. And when do they go from secretive to everybody needs to know about this? When do they typically make that turn?
I would say we started to bring others in when we had a viable prototype. So that means the design was pretty locked down. We've gone through some research, we'd done some testing, and I will say a lot of it actually was bringing in more of our sourcing and procurement and execution teams, which we talked about are a little bit more downstream. Mainly because too, we didn't want our competitors finding out about it, which a lot of these products are produced at the same factories overseas, let's be honest. And so,
Mhm.
so you need to be very careful and they can say they're your partner and yep, they're with you and everything, but it's business, right? And they know if there's innovation that it benefits them more if they've got it to all their consumers, versus, just one. So, we really waited till we were a little bit closer to being ready to go, okay, we got something viable here. We have a design, we've had some testing around a prototype. We think we have something feasible, viable. Let's start to bring in some of these other teams now on how do we now execute.
How do you protect yourself against someone else developing, like them being like, hey, here's some blueprints for
Yeah.
this.
It
Like, how do you, like, especially overseas where
Yeah,
we don't know
it's
people there?
difficult, right? It's, long-term relationships help with partners for sure. Because I don't wanna say everybody's like, "Oh, here, have everything." Long-term relationships, definitely help. I will say, making sure you've got your IP protected and they know that is very important. I've had the pleasure of working with great sourcing people as well who really manage those relationships with your manufacturing partners and making sure you've got really strong contracts there that they know if they do something, there are ramifications. And I think it's, making sure you've got those different pieces in place as you move forward.
You said before, and this is something I really kind of wanted to get into. You said before that ego is the enemy to insight,
Mhm.
and that can you unpack this for us? Like, how does ego get into the way of actually hearing what the customer is telling you?
I think even with me, almost 25 years in product development, I think, there's a lot I know, right? There's a lot I could probably tell you by looking at something, but I will never do it in that fact that consumers will consistently surprise you. And when you're looking at, and I think people are too close and too unbiased and they think they know. And because again, they've struck gold or they've done it before. And the worst thing you can do is let your ego get in there and drive decisions versus actually rooted in insight. And I've seen it time and time again where people do, and then they don't do the work. They don't do the business case. Oh, it'll sell. It'll sell. It'll be great. No problem. We've got good margin on it. It's going to sell. My family loves it. I love it. It'll be great. I asked employees around me. They like this one better. Let's move it. And I will tell you, I have seen products fail over it. And I think, taking yourself out of the equation, again, I go back to myself. I am not the average consumer in the United States. I think a lot of people, I've lived in big cities, right? I've lived in a more urban environment. The majority of the United States is very rural. And I think a lot of people don't understand that. The average income, the average schooling, where they live, how they're interacting, the family lifestyle. It's probably the majority of the United States is not what I have. And so I really need, and people really need to take themselves out of that if you want to have successful because you want the largest addressable market as possible in order to be successful.
So I'm just kind of curious. So when you look at, you've got rural and urban, how does that change how you develop a product? Like, can you just bring us into some real life examples?
Yeah, I think again it goes back to what's the problem that you're solving for because if it is a product that relates to more urban, right? You have a target market that's a little bit different than more rural or is it something for both of them, right? It's understanding the need states of those consumers and I will tell you I have developed products that were for more urban consumers. Like for instance, more urban consumers, typically live in smaller spaces, right? Small space living. They've got if you're in a city, you have an apartment. Well, you probably don't want really large countertop appliances then. So, you might develop a smaller line for them. Versus in rural, maybe space isn't an issue. So, it's making sure you've got the right target market for whatever problem is that you're solving for. And I think that's a really important thing to decipher. I think also understanding the retail landscape of the market that you're going after. Are they buying on D2C? Are they going into Walmart to shop? And understanding where that product's going to be placed is going to really help, especially in the back half in that go to market and impact how you make those decisions too.
What I'm realizing is you tend to work on a lot of products that are like very mainstream versus I think most products are more niche. I think it's an interesting I think it's an interesting kind of thing. Is that do you think was accurate to say? Like Pyrex, like you're saying, and I agree. Like I don't know very many houses that don't have Pyrex in their house, and even fewer people. I don't know if I could come up with one person that doesn't know of Pyrex
Mhm,
or a pop socket,
mhm,
you know.
mhm.
But is that do you think that's the standard for products, or do you think being mainstream is almost its own niche?
Um, yeah, I think being mainstream is your own niche. I think especially when you look at the cost of investment it takes to make a product successful, you want the largest addressable market, right? And creating a highly niched product um, may not be successful because number one, you're limiting your target, you're limiting your growth potential, right? We're all here to make at the end of the day, it's to make money, right? It's to sell as many as you
Mhm.
can and make money. And if you have a very niche product, number one, you may not sell that many. Number two, it's going to be very hard from a marketing perspective, maybe even to reach that consumer. I do think in general, the goal is not mainstream in terms of everybody's your consumer, but it is in terms of, hey, we have this problem to solve. Here's the largest addressable market. How do we make it successful for them?
Yeah.
So what are some simple, repeatable ways that a founder can bake that consumer insights into the routine? So it's not like a, oh my goodness, I have to do this. This is on my list of things to do. But it's like, do you know what? Now I've created a product. It's just natural to kind of now let's go see what the consumer is saying. Like, do you have any ways to help founders kind of bring that in?
Yeah, I think number one, it starts with a really great brief and understanding what is that problem we're trying to solve. And so constantly going back to that brief throughout the process and asking those questions. Too, I highly encourage getting that product into hands of people that are not your friends and family. And I know it's uncomfortable for some people, but go outside, get some feedback in terms of, stand on a corner, ask some people, see what they say, see what their initial reaction is. I also think, you know, read existing competing product reviews. I think that's a really great way, as well as after you've launched in love. Understand what consumers are saying about your product afterwards. Is all of these are very inexpensive, but can provide valuable insight as you then continue to make decisions.
Mm. All right. So when you say, so I'm just one follow. You say that it's inexpensive, but you're also working with PopSocket and Instapot. What is inexpensive to you?
Well, you'd be surprised. I will tell you, consumer research, oddly enough, when budgets are is the first thing to go. And I think it's because the people making the budget decisions are likely are not always the same ones that are making the product decisions and product roadmap decisions. Um, I will tell you, PopSockets, we didn't even have a research budget. And so that instant there were days, there were years where I definitely had it and budgeted and I got what I wanted. There were years that we didn't have any or we had very little. And so I will say, these are not $1 million budgets. I've done studies. Highest study I've probably ever done was 50,000, versus, and then, I've done things where I've had $200. So it doesn't have to be large and expensive. And I'm telling you, you'd be surprised. Some of these companies, again, when budgets get tight, consumer research is one of the first things to go, unfortunately.
When you see companies launching these mainstream products, what do you typically see for like development and launch budgets? Or are you
Yeah, it really
involved in that
depends on the
decision?
product, honestly,
Yeah.
right? Because you put a business case together. First of all, you look at what the category is doing, whatever if it's an existing
Mhm.
category, typically. You look at historical growth numbers. You look at what retail partners are you targeting to launch it in, or is it just on your D2C? And you estimate your volumes, right? And you get to a business case. You also estimate marketing expenses. What's it going to take to develop packaging? What's it going to take to have social and any in-store marketing or influencer marketing? And you put together a budget and make sure it's viable. So you just make sure you're doing your due diligence when you're looking at all those things.
I love it. So we are going to jump into our lightning round here. But basically, what it is, I'm going to ask you questions, and you can either give us short answers or long answers. It's completely up to you. It was intended for short answers, but I found that sometimes we get the best answers for these. So take your time if you need it. We've got 5 questions here for you. The first one is, what is the most surprising customer insight that you've seen?
Oh, most surprising. Hmm, that's a good one. Um, I think probably it goes back to Contigo when I was there, when here we thought we were sitting on a gold mine, right, with our first product, and it went to Target and bombed. And then we saw they didn't understand the button, which seems so simple, right? That was probably the most surprising to us and most insightful, probably too, in terms of very simple changes to make a product successful. Yeah, I would probably say that one.
What is one thing that founders should do before launching anything?
Um, Again, I go back to desirability, viability, feasibility. I think really making sure you've got strong cases in each one of those and feel very confident that you have a desirable product, a viable product from a financial standpoint, and a feasible product to execute on. I think that founders should really go back and making sure that they're measuring against those and have those.
I want to actually do a quick follow up on that because you made me think about something. Do you have any questions that you go like specific questions? You're like, these are questions I ask for every product because it gives me such valuable insight.
No, I wouldn't say though. I probably have some that I don't ask. I will tell you, one area that I don't like to get consumer feedback on is pricing, actually, because you ask a consumer prices, they always want to pay the littlest amount possible. Everybody wants to pay less and less and less. And without seeing a product in store with competitive products around it that they're comparing it to, I think pricing is a really challenge to. And I've done pricing studies, and people always want to do them. And I'm not a big proponent for those for sure. In the fact that to me, again, it goes back to looking at the market to give a viable retail price to a product versus what else are you looking at in that category, and then going back to the financials and the cost of the product and making sure it's viable rather than going, oh well, the consumer only wants to pay $4.99 for that. I'll give you a really great example. When we were at Pyrex, we had a lot of decorated storage. We launched decorated storage. We were the first one to do it and print on it. And then we moved into licensing. And when you move into licensing, you pay for a license, right? And no one wanted to increase cost or increase cost more there. And they didn't think the consumer would pay for it. Nope. And didn't want to do pricing. And we kind of came to a head where financially we weren't positive. We had no choice. And we raised prices and there was no impact to sales whatsoever. And I think, going back to, again, if there's that desirability of the product, consumers will pay for it. Making sure that you've got those things in place and that that product is successful.
So if you're not doing a price study, how are you determining what the market will allow for in pricing?
A lot
How do
of
you come up with
times
that?
it's looking at similar products or similar products within similar spaces. For sure, if you're featuring up, right, you definitely can increase product, as well as consumers have pricing thresholds. And a lot of people don't always understand 9.99, 19.99, 49.99. And, understanding the retail market, number one, is going to be really key, and market sensitivity there. Number two, having a really strong product cost, and understanding your full cost and getting that breakdown and negotiating that cost down. And then number three, running the numbers and running scenarios and sensitivities around the numbers. So understanding who your launch partner, where you're going to launch, what are those, how much market share do you think you're going to get? In terms of, let's say, if you're going to, and you can find data, especially now with AI, you can find data online and get really rough estimates around, okay, how many of these are sold per year, or how many of these are even shipped from China per year? And then, okay, well, I think I can grab 1% of that. to help you run numbers and then run sensitivities. What happens if I raise the price $5? What are the assumptions there? What are the assumptions if I decrease the price $5? And really look to make sure that then you have a viable product that everyone's making money on, right?
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense.
So coffee or tea?
Coffee.
Just sorry, I just wanted to throw one that wasn't had nothing to do with product at all in there, just to
Definitely
kinda see what you
coffee.
would do.
Definitely coffee.
Actually, Brandon, are you coffee or tea? Or you're an energy
It
person,
depends
aren't
on
you?
the day, really. I drink both pretty much almost every day. In the morning, I'm coffee. In the evening, it's tea. So,
Okay. So Kristen, what products have you seen do the best throughout your career? Like, is there any like genre of product that you're like, these have done really well for me, and these ones not really?
Yeah, I think again, it goes back to solving a consumer pain point. Um,
Yeah.
Always when we've solved for a true consumer pain point, those have been the one, and then been able to speak to it in terms of marketing and packaging. Those have been the ones that have been really successful, whether it be my early days at Contigo, launching their thermal line, and then we launched kids because kids weren't done with spilling. And then, to whether it be Pyrex with the deep, and then we actually even launched a smaller line for Pyrex around toaster ovens. To me, it's always going back to what are those consumer pain points and making sure you're solving a problem for the consumer that's making their life easier. People will pay for ease in their life. Less headaches every day, that's what they want.
yeah, I think that's great. I think the way you said that is right on point. Like it's not just about solving a problem, but really solving the pain point in that
Mhm,
problem. And the bigger the pain, the bigger the payment.
mhm. And it doesn't have to be a big thing, like small little improvements in their life brings them joy, right? And
Yeah,
so it's solving those pain points that lets them focus on something else for the day and brings them a little joy.
absolutely. What's one piece of advice that you've received, or what's your I guess what's the best piece of advice that you received? I
Yeah,
meant to say.
I would probably say never be afraid to give your opinion, but always listen to others as well. And I think there are a lot of people that love to give opinions, but then necessarily won't listen to others. But never be afraid to speak up in a meeting, no matter who's in the room.
Nice, I like that.
Love it. So, we're about out of time here, so I just wanna where can our audience, catch up with you?
Yeah, I would say if they want to, reach out via LinkedIn, that's probably the best bet. It's tied to my email, and you can get a hold of me that way.
Perfect. So if you're watching this, we have the LinkedIn will be under this video or on the side, depending on where you're watching it. But it'll be in the description, and you'll be able to connect with her over LinkedIn. Kristen, I just want to say thank you so
Yes,
much.
Chris.
I really, really appreciate you being
Mhm.
here. It's been very insightful. I know you're not the consumer, but it's very insightful. And I love just the way you think about consumer insights. To me, it's a breath of fresh air from most of the corporate kind of stuff that I've seen
Mhm.
so far.
Awesome.
So I just want to say
Thank
thank you.
you. Yeah, thanks for having me. Really enjoyed it.
Perfect. Brandon, do you have any last questions before I sign off?
No, I think we really got through a lot very quickly. I liked it, and I like that you guys are actually in the house with the clients, seeing them use it in that real environment.
Mhm,
That's something you don't really hear much about. It's more like a out
mhm.
and typically come over here. We're gonna give you this thing. See how you use it.
Yeah, I think a lot of people, when you say consumer research, their mind goes to focus group, right?
Yeah, focus group and
Mhm.
the first interactions,
Yeah.
not the delayed. I've been using it. Here's how I use it
Mhm. Mhm.
interaction.
For sure.
So that's kind of unique in my
Mhm.
eyes.
Kristen, what are you doing now? Because we talked about a lot of the stuff that you've done in your past, but what are you doing right now as far as work?
Yeah, I'm actually doing consulting a bit. I've been doing some project work for a major retailer, and then I have two startups that I'm working with right now, and loving the variety of work and really helping drive some really new product and some cool product to market.
Can you talk
Perfect.
about the products now, or are they still?
Yeah, one of them is, called Screen Skins, which is a tech accessory, which is, the first of personalization within screen protection. So I've been working, with them a lot, really fun group, doing some really cool stuff, especially within licensing. So if you have a favorite sports team and want to put that on your phone, and some really cool, I will say back end stuff. They have really mastered the print on demand model, and limiting risk and inventory. And really, really talented group of guys. And then the other startup is actually a heating technology startup called Novara, who I've been working with for about the past 2 years. And really, actually, we work within a couple different segments: mobility, architecture, and then consumer products, which I'm really helping leading the charge on. But heating elements in things such as small kitchen appliances, other traditional heating elements. We have a new heating technology that basically can be applied as a coating or a film. So imagine turning anything to a heater, being for such as patio furniture, heating patio furniture, heating appliances on the go via battery. It uses significantly less energy than traditional heating methods. So have really been working. That one's really fun because that is game changing innovation.
Right.
And it's super super interesting. A really interesting group over there as well, based out of Ohio, and really helping them educate them on consumer products and the applications, and then working with companies to apply it. So been really
Can,
fun.
can you imagine mixing that with Pyrex? I'm just saying, like, where you can bring in, like, keeping stuff warm while you're going out without stuffing it into a
Yeah.
giant. I just
We've been
the application
yeah, we've been testing
phenomenal.
a lot. I mean, we have like a heated pizza bag right now, right, for delivery services, and all the food delivery heated, and it's battery operated and lasts so much. I can't remember the numbers offhand, but it's like 80% reduction in like energy use. So, really, really
Hmm.
great. We've tested it on, other appliances and other on-the-go food items and heating things outside of your home. It's also, significantly less expensive than some of the other traditional heating methods. So just the flexibility and design application. I mean, imagine spray heating. You think about, how you apply heat, and whether it be, let's say it's an Instant Pot, right? Or a slow cooker. A slow cooker is a great one. You've got a heating element at the bottom of the product and a coil heater around the middle to heat it, right? You could have heat all the way up the sides, and you could change the shape of it. And right now a lot of it's based on that coil heater. So it really allows for design flexibility, not even beyond energy consumption, but it really it's really game changing innovation. That's really cool.
That's really, really cool. Like, I cannot wait for that to hit the market. If it is it already on the
Not
market?
yet. Not yet. We're still
Oh,
in development in a lot of the areas.
well,
Mm,
I cannot wait for it. If you guys have a product and you want a consumer insights guru, reach out to Kristen. She is one of the best. If not, I don't know if there's anyone better than you. I've never met anyone better than
Thank
you. Just by listening to you talk, you have that. You've got that hammered down. I love it. But if you need Kristen, go to her LinkedIn. And if you're developing a product and you need some prototyping done, come to my product developer, and then like and subscribe. Have yourselves a great
thank
day.
you.